Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are continuing reading from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And this particular section is called Regions Higher and Lower. And we've been talking a little bit about the various chakras of the body and how each of those reflects different levels of knowledge and understanding. And so we're going on page 427. He who is able to rise beyond selfishness, who has the power to feel for others, who has a philanthropic turn of mind, and has the milk of human kindness in him in profusion, can only raise himself up to the fourth center, the anahata, localized in the region of his heart. The sufferings of others make him more miserable than his own suffering. Such a man is called a man of great charity and generosity. Everyone looks upon him with reverence and regards him as an extraordinary man. He is regarded as God on earth. He never lives for himself. The divinity in him has come forth, and his face shines like that of a god. He sees God in every man and woman of the world, and, like a humble devotee, serves each and every one of them. His love does not remain confined to humanity only. He loves and serves even the lower animals, seeing the same God in them. Thus he goes on for some time, till, serving the children of God, his love towards him increases, and he comes to know his greatness more and more. All of those hims and he's refer to God. They're all capitalized. So his love for God increases, and he comes to know God's greatness more and more. When the knowledge of the infinite wisdom, power, and love of God fully grows in him, he comes to know the insignificant nature and littleness of his own self, which ultimately wanes away like the moon before the rising sun. And he then puts this question to himself: does not the whole world belong to the all-powerful and all-merciful Lord of the universe? Does he not know far better than myself to protect his children? Are not all his ways absolutely right? Who am I to correct and rectify him? Does he require my help? Because he, the all-powerful, cannot manage his own affairs himself? Why are men miserable? Has God made them so? Man reaps the fruits of his past actions. That is why the blind and the lame, etc., suffer and get punished, because they did not behave properly in their previous lives. I should not be fooled again to interfere with his affairs, for he, the Lord of the infinite love, knows far better than myself or anyone else how to treat his own children kindly. My interference may only bring about a slight disturbance in the eternally unbroken harmony of his all-providing method in managing and governing his own creation. Footnote: this attitude of the true spiritual man should never be confused with the callousness of the selfish man towards the suffering of his fellow creatures. The latter only puts forward all these arguments to hide his selfishness, but they have no force when advanced by him, in as far as they are not backed up with the higher faith of the truly spiritual man. My primary duty, therefore, is to realize him, so that I may be blessed forever, and then I am made to work. If I am then made to work, all my actions will be entirely in harmony with his will, and not till then. So I will have to make him my own first. All else comes afterwards. Yes, if you stop before those last few sentences, you get one of the main criticisms of Hinduism, that it's an uncaring faith. And of course, that's not at all true. In fact, in traditional Hinduism, there were dharmic duties of every householder to take care of people that were poor, people that were sick, and then you had to take care of the environment. You had to set aside certain parts of the surrounding land as a nature preserve, and you had to take care of animals and so forth. But what he's referring to is someone who has reached a very high state of spiritual development already and wants to attain the highest so that his service can be truly in harmony with the divine and not from any kind of lower standpoint. When you go to worship Sri Raghunatha, Swami of Srinagar, you find many beggars coming to you for alms. If you go on distributing money or food to them, the more you do so, the more beggars who will be coming to you, and there will be no end of them. While you are thus engaged, the temple gate has been shut, and you come back home without seeing the Lord. Therefore, you should worship the Lord first, and then come back to distribute alms to the poor. Thus the man of charity gives up all his philanthropic works as he detects his blind ego behind all his actions. He dives deeper and deeper within himself in search of the Lord of infinite love, and never stops till he realizes him in the region of his heart. What indestructible bliss comes to him when his soul is in direct communion with God. He finds his true father, true mother, true friend, and true lover in him, and he can never turn his eyes away from him. He has found out his true home at last. His mind cannot think of anything else at the time. His mouth cannot talk of anything else other than his beloved. He has gone up to the fifth center, the Vishuddha chakra, or the center of absolute purity. And in some sense, you could say that Swami Vivekananda intended people that associated with the Ramakrishna modern mission to do all these things simultaneously, to do the service with the attitude that it's helping you realize God, not as something separate. So in some sense, it's been combined, and you don't have to completely drop all of your doing good to other people while you are working on realizing God. You incorporate them both at the same time. The text goes on and it says, a man must be absolutely pure to go there. What is purity? It means onlyness or singleness. When a man's mind is occupied by the one idea of God, when he can talk only about him and nothing else, he is said to be absolutely pure. God remains eternally bound to him as the same Lord in his incarnation as Sri Krishna has expressed himself. Quote, those people who give up all thoughts and meditate upon me with exclusive devotion, I serve such men of unbroken meditation by earning and laying by them. Unquote. When a man can make himself thus pure, then only he is qualified to rise up from the fourth to the fifth center. When once he goes to this center, he has no inclination to come down, and if he is inclined to come down at all, he only descends to the fourth center. So he has to rise still higher and higher, till at last he comes to the sixth center, the Ajna chakra. He rises up to this sixth chakra, sees God directly before him, and gets so much merged in the ocean of love towards his most beloved one that unless his previous karma that has already begun to bear fruit drags him down, or unless he has previously determined to come down, he is never inclined to descend from that highest eminence. The absolute and all-centered love draws him nearer and nearer to infinity, till, after 21 days, his limited self becomes unified with the limitless. His individuality loses itself in the universal being of the Lord and becomes one with it. As long as he remains in this sixth center, he does not commune with him mentally, nor has he the power to speak of him to anyone. He sees him directly and infinitely enjoys the beatific vision. If his fruit-bearing prarabdha karma or his previous determination makes him descend even from that exalted height, he can only come down as far as the fourth center. Whosoever he commands at that time shall have to obey. It may be a man or an angel. Hence, the sixth center is called Ajna Chakra, or the center of commandment. To elucidate this, let me narrate to you a parable of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna. Also, I think I'll take a moment to remind us that when Swami Vivekananda indicated the desire to simply sit in the bliss of samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna scolded him and said, "I thought you were greater than that." And so that also gives us an indication that that's not necessarily the ultimate goal in the eyes of Sri Ramakrishna or Vivekananda. Four friends once determined to search out for the land of bliss, and they were searching for it not for one life, but for several lives, till at last in one of their lifelong searches they came across a very high wall. It checked their outward course, and so they determined to scale it. Accordingly, they secured a considerable number of strong iron spikes, which they began to drive fast, partially into the wall, one above the other. Then one of them, placing his foot on the projected parts of the nails, began to ascend with the determination to come down after seeing what was behind the wall. But when he got up this way, he saw something inside, which made him laugh in ecstasy, and not caring to come down to his friends, he jumped in. The second man of the party now went up by the same path with the same determination, and shared the same fate with the first man. The third also never fared better. The fourth, thus left alone, now went up and saw to his great satisfaction the land of bliss, for which he had been toiling for so many lives. He also had a great desire to jump in, like his comrades, but then he remembered the almost hopeless plight of many people searching for the same place, who, being unable to find it, were on the point of giving up the search in despair. Remembering them, he resisted the temptation of falling in and slowly came down to carry this good news to the millions that were toiling for the same end. From the above parable, we learn that very few can resist the irresistible desire to be absorbed in the Lord, the abode of bliss. He who can come down from the glorious height is called an incarnation of God. All great men of the world who are regarded as incarnations of God by different nations are men of the above description. They never care for their own enjoyment. Such great souls alone are qualified to do good to the world. They do not work out of necessity or compulsion like the ordinary man of the world. They work out of unselfish love for humanity. That is why the infinite and unmanifested Lord of the world, of the whole universe, is more appreciated, worshipped, and loved in these manifested aspects of his. Men have erected countless temples, shrines, pagodas, and churches in honor of these God-men, to whom they will have to remain eternally indebted for the immeasurable good they have done, undergoing all sorts of miseries inflicted upon them by those ungrateful people for whose good alone they lived, labored, and died. And of course, the reason that we worship such people is because we want to imbibe their qualities. We're trying to become more like them in the process. Just as if you want to be a great tennis player, you watch great tennis players playing. You don't watch a bunch of amateurs playing. If you want to be a great musician of a particular instrument, you listen to and watch musicians that are playing those instruments very well. And that motivates you and inspires you and gives you ideas as to how you might also do that. So in the same way, we worship the great spiritual giants and study their lives and pray to them and concentrate on them. And by so doing, we hope to mold some of our character in their light by having our mind dwell on those personalities. The vibrations of those qualities begin to get absorbed. We begin to radiate part of our being with those same vibrations. We're all vibrational beings, and we already have the seeds of great religious achievement within us. All we have to do is bring them out. Just like if you have a piano nearby and the damper pedal is put down so that the strings are free to vibrate, if you vibrate a tuning fork on the case of the piano, the strings that vibrate in harmony with that tuning fork will begin to vibrate. So similarly, if we keep our mind vibrating at a particular spiritual level by studying these great souls, then those parts of our being begin to vibrate more strongly. And of course, that's why you also try to avoid bad company and bad influences, because you don't want your mind to dwell on those vibrations. So this is the general reason why we worship these people. By God, we mean that these three highest perfections, eternal existence, infinite knowledge, and undying bliss, your struggles will never come to an end for lives and lives together until you realize these. The seers of old were able to know their infinite self by the irresistible strength of their will. You also can succeed in the same manner if you have as strong a will as they had. What has been done once may be done several times over. Says the Shruti, quote, "If you know the highest truth in this life, then you shall really live. But if in this life you do not know it, great shall be the number of deaths you shall have to fall a prey to," unquote. May the grace of the Lord enable you to realize the truth, even in this life. Now, earlier in this section, he talked about our pursuit of knowledge and how many scholars and so forth study many books and in order to gain knowledge. And it's interesting that if you look at the pursuit of knowledge in a particular way, you can see that the underlying unity and oneness of it shines through. What do we try to do when we're studying a particular discipline? Take the life sciences, for example. Well, first you observe this world of multiplicity, and you see all sorts of living things around you. And then you want to try to organize that knowledge in some way that you can better remember it, because remembering zillions of facts is very difficult. So if we can organize them somehow, then we can remember them better. So we categorize living things, and we get various levels of categorization. So we have families and species and genus and so forth, genus and species. So, and that's all based on the similarities of all of these diverse things. So we look for similarities and we look for patterns. And then In the modern day, we've discovered, of course, that DNA is common to all living things. And not only is DNA common, but we have a lot of the same DNA. That even though obviously there are differences between one organism and the other, there are many basic physiological processes that are all the same in all of the different living organisms, or very similar with just slight tweaks to them. And so we discover that there's an underlying unity to all living things by starting out with the diversity and the multiplicity and looking closer and closer and closer until we find that there's a basic unity. In chemistry, you've got the same thing. You look at all these different substances. And of course, in the beginning, people had no idea about any of it. They just saw things were different. And pretty soon they got the idea that some of these things were more similar than others. And so again, we put them in categories. And then pretty soon we discovered that some of them could be broken down into simpler elements and others could be combined into more complicated elements. And then we've discovered that there were something called atoms, and that everything was made up of atoms. So there was a certain unity behind all of these things. But even then, we found more unity by finding that all of these atoms are made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And that basically, if you study the evolution of elements in the universe, you discover that they're all basically just hydrogen, just globbed together in larger quantities to create the heavier elements in the stars. And so you find that everything is coming from some sort of unified basis. And so if we really pay attention to even our ordinary knowledge, we're led to the conclusion that there's some unifying oneness or wholeness or unity that's behind everything that we see. And no matter which branch of knowledge we choose to pursue, we discover that there's an underlying unity, and that you get a better viewpoint if you look at the whole. For example, let's take psychology. In the beginning, psychology really got its start with Gustav Fechner, who studied the way people are able to perceive slight differences. Like how many wavelengths difference does a color have to be before people are going to say that they're different colors? Or how many hertz of frequency does a sound have to be different before you say that's a different tone? Is it in tune or is it out of tune? So if you're tuning instruments, you have to be aware of that. And it's kind of amazing sometimes when you see how we tend to end up interpreting a somewhat broad range of frequencies as the same tone. And he did this for all the different senses and came up with some mathematical models. So again, he looked for patterns. And then, you see, he was looking at the individual mind. It had nothing to do with anybody else's mind, but he was looking at individual minds. But then he found patterns that emerged across the individual minds. But then other psychologists, like Freud, said, well, we can't just study an individual. The individual's grown up in a family, and then they get married and have their own family, and they have jobs, and they live in a community. So we need to look at the relationships between the different people. And then Jung said, well, you can't just look at the relationships between the people, and then of course Freud looked at the individual unconscious. Jung said you have to look at the collective unconscious, that there's a background unconsciousness that pervades societies and human beings in general, and that if you have to really understand where the person's collective unconscious is, what's motivating them is often something that they're not conscious of, and it's not just their individual consciousness, but a collective unconsciousness. And so, again, you have to look at larger and larger ideas and a more holistic approach in order to gain greater and greater knowledge. So if one observes that, one again is reminded of this underlying unity of existence that's behind this multiplicity. And of course, that's just because everything that we're seeing through the veil of Maya is really Brahman. There's really a oneness in there. It's all comes from Brahman. If it's all coming from Brahman, it's all going to be unified. And so that's really the basis of it. And so these things just remind us, so you can take any discipline that you like and realize that the discipline is leading us towards an understanding that there is a oneness behind all the multiplicity. All right, so let's see. He now is going to go on to another section, and we have a good 20 minutes here. Oh, I was going to mention too, that parable. I took a very loose spin-off of that parable for the first interfaith opera that I wrote. Very loose, but the idea was that it was an interfaith opera, and it was set in ancient Greece and Rome, and the astrologers had all predicted that this particular Greek man was going to marry this Roman woman, and their parents knew each other because of trading relationships. But then it came to the wedding vows, and they couldn't decide whether it was going to be dedicated to, or they were going to call on Jupiter or Zeus. And this was a big problem. So they were sent to Mount Olympus, and they found both Jupiter and Zeus sitting there side by side, and they were very curious. And they said, well, you can't understand this unless you go to this Valley of the Mist. And this was analogous to this jumping over the wall into the place of bliss. That's where all the answers laid. But the catch was somebody had to sacrifice their life. And so this one person who had originally been in love with this Roman lady and obviously couldn't marry her anymore, he sacrificed his life and revealed that all the gods and goddesses were simply playing with us with their different forms. But anyway, it was that parable that inspired that peculiar plot. All right, sorry. Now I'm going to read the locus of the soul. Before we attempt to find out the locus of the soul, it is desirable to know something about it. What do we understand by the word soul? Many are apt to confound it with man. Man has a name and a form, a caste and a creed, a father and a mother, while the soul has no such thing. Man lives in the world while the soul lives in man or in any other living organism, whether animal, celestial, or infernal. Man has a birth and a death, but the soul takes countless births and dies as many times. Interesting how it comes out equal that way. Births and deaths have to be the same. Hence, man cannot be the soul. If I ask any man, who are you? He will spontaneously say, quote, my name is so-and-so. I am the son of Mr. So-and-so. And it must be the family name, so-and-so. Such an answer clearly shows that the first personal pronoun, I, or the ego, is identical with the man and not with the soul. It rises with man and sets with him. Like a man, it is bounded on both sides by birth and death. But there seems to be an apparent contradiction to what we have just now said regarding the ego in the following statement of Sri Krishna. Quote, but it is not a fact that myself, yourself, and all these kings never existed before this life, and that all of us are not going to exist hereafter. Unquote. Here the ego has been made to develop the boundary lines of birth and death. But we must remember that the speaker in this case is not a man, but God, and since God is infinite, his body, mind, ego, soul, and self must be infinite. because there cannot be more than one infinity. God's body, mind, ego, soul, and self are all one. Later on, we find him distinguishing his ego from that of his friend, where he says, quote, "Many births have elapsed of myself as well as of yourself, O Arjuna. I know them all, but you know them not." Unquote. Here Sri Krishna puts the impassable barrier of birth and death, between which lies the ego of man. Thus the ego is identical with man and not with the soul. Now, of course, that's still a matter of terminology, because you have people that remember past lives and people that are regressed into past lives and that sort of thing. So it's sometimes the word soul is used in too many ways. In order to correct Arjuna's wrong notion about the soul that dwells in the body, Sri Krishna has described its nature in these glowing words. And in describing it, we find him using the masculine gender instead of neuter, as many sages before him have done in the Upanishads. And of course, we know that people might be reborn in different genders. There's nothing specific about your gender. We've probably all lived lives of different genders over and over again. Quote from the Upanishads, "As a man casts away his old and useless clothes and replaces them with new ones, so the soul that dwells in man casts away his old and useless bodies and takes others that are new. Him the weapons do not cut, the fire does not burn, the water does not wet, and the wind does not dry. He cannot be cut, he cannot be burnt, cannot be wetted, and cannot be dried. He is ever existing, all-pervading, changeless, motionless, ever-living, unmanifested, inconceivable, and always the same." This is how the sages describe him with a capital H. So, of course, when you identify yourself with the ultimate reality, this is exactly what you are. You are not manifest, you're always living, you are motionless, and yet you are everywhere, you're all-pervading, you're inconceivable, because it is not a little you, it's the infinite you. So from the scriptures, we learn that the soul that dwells in man is not finite like him. It has been described as all-pervading, infinite, changeless, absolutely simple, and not compound in its nature, ever-living, that is, ever conscious or never conscious, hence all-knowing, being infinitely conscious, and always the same, perfectly satisfied, having no want to make it restless or miserable. Thus we find it to be eternally blissful and all-knowing. So he's obviously identifying here the soul with this infinite part of ourself, not with the individual jiva, which would perhaps be what he might use to call the thing that gets reincarnated. Something has to get reincarnated, and we're born with tendencies and unconscious from these previous lives, some scars. So something is persistent between the various lives, but he doesn't seem to be using the word soul in that context. Thus, we find it to be eternally blissful and all-knowing. But the moment we look toward man, we find him to be exactly the reverse of it. The soul, which makes the existence of man possible, which shines through his ego and mind, and thus brings them into existence, but for which the organs of sense and activity could not be what they are, in fact, which makes up the whole of man, and which is eternally blissful and all-knowing, as we have just learned from the scriptures, is not to be found in its true color in man at all. On the other hand, we find it to be entirely misrepresented by him. How can a man conscious only of his physical self ever identify himself with an infinite soul? In so doing, we will have to deny the testimony of all his senses. He will have to deny the testimony of all his senses. He will have to go against all observations and experiments. And very few people there are nowadays who are willing to sacrifice these undeniable evidences at the altar of the Scriptures. So, naturally, the question comes, is there no rational proof to contradict the verdict of the senses and uphold the affirmation of the Scriptures regarding not only the true nature of the soul, but the very existence of it? In answer to this question, we say that the Scriptures never contradict reason. It is a fact that the power of reason cannot reach some of the highest flights of the Scriptures, where they deal with matters pertaining to the very being of the Supreme, secondless and infinite self. But it has full access to all the mysteries of creation that are not conceivable by the mind, provided it has an inclination and a will to unravel them. Human mind being limited, it can only grapple with objects and ideas that are limited. But it is also a fact that with the help of the limited, we can reach the limitless. Just as with the help of a river limited between its two banks, we can reach the limitless ocean. In the same manner, with the help of the individual soul manifested as man, we can reach the infinite soul described in the Scriptures. Let us see how we can do that. That, of course, is what religious practice is, exactly, leading us from the sense of individuality and separateness from God to a sense of oneness with God. Man passes through three conditions of waking, dream, and sleep in 24 hours. In his waking condition, he is conscious of the world around him, of events that happened, as well as of what are going to happen. That is, he is conscious of the past, the present, and the future, and whatever takes place or comes to be perceived or conceived by him in these three manifestations of time. So, in his waking condition, he is conscious of various phenomena, both physical and mental. Descartes was one of the earliest people who had to question how we know what is real. And the normal idea is that, we see things out in the world, and so our sense organs tell us what is real. But he posed the very interesting question, well, maybe it's kind of like the Matrix or something, some evil matrix. He called it the Descartes' evil demon that was feeding your brain certain impressions so that you had the impression of bread sitting on the table, and then you had the impression of tasting the bread when you eat it, and the impression of feeling full afterwards. So these are all just mental impressions that were being fed to you by some evil demon, and nothing was really real. So it's interesting that he was one of the early people that had to grapple with that problem. Consciousness is that illumination or light in man which makes him know the countless things and the ideas which make up his outer and inner world. And just as by one light many objects are rendered visible, so by one consciousness many objects and ideas are rendered knowable. But for that one consciousness, nothing can be known. Just as darkness causes everything to be invisible, so unconsciousness makes everything unknowable. Thus, all knowledge is based upon one consciousness, just as all radii are based upon one center. Every man has a natural hankering for knowing more and more, and therefore, whenever he acquires fresh knowledge, he feels himself greatly satisfied, since knowledge is possible only in consciousness, just as vision is possible only in light. The satisfaction which comes from the acquirement of fresh knowledge is possible only for consciousness, and hence satisfaction and consciousness always go hand in hand. From this, it can be safely deduced that perfect satisfaction comes to a man only when his consciousness is never opposed to, and thus limited by unconsciousness. boundless or infinite consciousness is therefore inseparably connected with infinite satisfaction or bliss. The all-knowing alone is all blissful. A very interesting analysis comparing illumination and darkness with consciousness and unconsciousness, and showing how we get very delighted when we figure something out or when we learn something new. Our minds like that a lot. And so if you expand upon that, you can see that if you become infinitely knowing, then you'll be infinitely blissful. And of course, that's the goal of spiritual practice. Consciousness, he goes on to say, being distinct and separate only in relation to unconsciousness, it cannot be distinguished from itself. Its one distinctive feature in all circumstances being its inseparable connection with blissfulness. As water cannot be distinguished from water, so consciousness cannot be distinguished from consciousness. And of course, Brahman is existence, consciousness, and bliss. So you'd expect consciousness and bliss to be synonymous. Yeah, you wouldn't expect them to be different. And it's just the fact that things exist, that you can have consciousness at all, and consciousness then leads to bliss. So they're all really wrapped up into one package. When man enters the condition of dream, the dream world is before him, and he is conscious of all the things that make up that world. His consciousness persists in that condition and is the same as that which exists in his waking condition. But we are apt to think that when he sleeps soundly, he becomes unconscious, and that his consciousness therefore ceases to exist at the time. Let us examine the state. It is a fact that memory is always connected with past experience. Whatever we have seen, touched, tasted, smelt, heard of, or known before, we can call back or remember, and not other things. And in order to perceive and know anything, the conscious knower must be there. Whenever we wake up from sound sleep, do we not recall or remember that we have slept very soundly? I think we mentioned that some of us didn't quite agree with that statement, but that's the typical party line, you could say. But it seems to me all you know is that you don't remember anything. Maybe that's something. Maybe that's it. You know that you didn't have any dreams. But anyway, the conscious knower must have been there to know it, and then only remembrance or memory is possible. So consciousness persists even in the condition of sound sleep, and it is the same as that which exists in the states of waking and dreaming. In waking condition, the physical senses, mind, ego, and consciousness all live and work together. But in the condition of dream, the physical senses fall off, and the other three persist, while in the condition of sound sleep, the first three fall off, and only consciousness persists. And of course, now we can do brain studies, and we find that the brain still is very active. It's not like the brain has gone offline completely. In fact, it's very busy repairing itself and consolidating memories and doing all sorts of things, clearing out debris. So certainly from brain studies, we know that the brain is not asleep, and if it's consciousness working through the brain, then we could say that the consciousness had to exist. Since the whole of man's life is made up of these three conditions, and since consciousness never ceases to be in all of them during his whole lifetime, consciousness runs on ceaselessly, one and the there all together. While the physical senses, the mind and the ego, have breaks, these, there was a comma there that I skipped over. Okay, so that's a new sentence here. These three rise and set like the sun, whereas consciousness neither rises nor sets, but continues to be in one and the same manner all throughout and never changes. There is an innate belief in the uniformity of nature's work to be found in every man, which he can never shake off, and which he has made the existence of scientific knowledge possible. For instance, if a man dissects one human body and finds it to contain a certain number of bones, arteries, veins, muscles, nerves, etc., he cannot help concluding that all human bodies must contain the same number of these, and thus he brings into existence a science of anatomy. Believing in the uniformity of nature's works and examining a certain object in nature for a few days, we at once deduce all those laws under which it acts. Thus, if we examine the nature of consciousness for a few days, months, and even decades, we find it to be changeless, and so we cannot help arriving at the conclusion that its nature is to be one and the same always, that is, changeless. And this is the quality of an eternal and infinite being. For if it were non-eternal, it would have to be changeful, which is not the case. And if it were finite, it would be liable to death, which cannot be. And as we have just now seen, this consciousness in man is eternal and infinite, or as it is called in the Upanishads, Sat Chit Sat. On account of its being conscious, it is also called Chit. So we'll end there for today and continue next time, continuing this discussion of the locus of the soul. And then I think it's the week after that we have our sound bath, one more class after that, and then we'll be on summer break. So let's see, is there any other announcements? Interesting. Oh, Ram Nam tomorrow night, so you can join us for Ram Nam, and then we have the lecture on the topic has something to do with purity. Forgotten the exact title, but anyway, we'll close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.